Okay, well, yeah, thanks for making it here. I kept my background up from yesterday. We had our last advisory committee of the year and we were having some fun with it. Wendy's got her Costa Rica
Yeah.
trip still.
Yep. I didn't change it.
Yeah. Yeah, my thought was, I think a lot of folks are just like end of year, and this group has kind of, I think it's much easier for people to focus on it when it's like the clarity of election season. But we did, several folks asked that we keep, coming together as having space for a conversation about student voting and campus election engagement. So that is what this is. And I guess we'll just keep seeing what folks' interest is. And Hunter in particular, I think we're interested in just getting some analysis or kind of your perspective on what the 2021 legislative session kind of means for student voting, and kind of some rundown of kind of what what you think we should be aware of as folks in higher ed.
Yeah, so kind of like three bigger voting bills I think that were on our radar that all passed, and things that we didn't support. Let Lisa get on here.
Hey, Lisa.
Yeah, so the first one I'll hit on is probably the more minor one to worry about, but it might just be something to be aware of, is House Bill 506. And what that one did is, in the past, if you were 17 but you should be 18 before the election, you could register to vote and receive a ballot. And as long as you're 18 before that election day, you'll receive that ballot and you can vote it. Now you could still register to vote if you're going to be 18 before election day, but you won't be issued a ballot. So there may be some like incoming freshmen who are 17 that are turning 18 right before that election, and there's kind of a weird gap that they need to be aware of, that they won't actually get that ballot. So the closer their birthday is to the election, the more difficult it's going to be for them to actually get it mailed to them. They'll need to go in person likely and actually pick it up or vote at a polling place on election day if they're 18 really close to the election. So that's just something I think to pay attention to, and just be aware of, especially if folks are doing voter registration on their campuses. Is if someone is 17, they can still vote if they're going to be 18 by the election, but just making sure they know that they're going to need to make sure they have a way to get their ballot.
And so is that one waiting the governor's signature, or is that law?
I believe that one is waiting the signature. Yeah. Last I checked, let's see. It had been transmitted to his desk, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, transmitted to the governor on the 4th. So I think today or tomorrow is the deadline, I believe, to get that signed. So that's definitely something we're going to be paying attention to, and just trying to like figure out if we have some like guidance for folks that are doing voter registration to make sure they're aware of that and they can talk that through with anybody. So if we get anything like that, I'll make sure to send it your way. House Bill 176 is sort of the really big one that we're fighting the whole way. So that's the one that eliminates election day voter registration and then moves it to the deadline is noon the day before the election. So obviously in the past, Montanans were able to register on election day up until polls closed. And as long as you were in line by 8 p.m., you could still register to vote. And that was something that we started, I believe, in 2005. And then in 2014, the legislature passed a referendum to put it to voters to see if we wanted to keep same-day voter registration, and voters overwhelmingly supported same-day voter registration. So, just as recently as 2014, we voted on this and supported it, but now we are back to eliminating that. So that's going to be a major concern. We know that around, I don't have the exact number, I was trying to look for it before this call, but I don't have it handy. It's something like 60,000 people have used same-day voter registration since it was introduced. So it's a whole lot of folks use it across the state. And it's definitely something that students have utilized. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've needed to arrange rides for folks to get them to the polls or direct them to those buses on election day to make sure they know they need to go and get in line to register to vote. And It was especially a really big problem at MSU in 2018. We saw lots and lots and lots of students who were showing up at the polling location on campus at MSU, thinking they were registered to vote, finding out they weren't, and then needing to go down to the courthouse. And that's when we had extremely long lines there. And the justification for this was just that it's a burden on county election administrators to have to do this. I'll know we didn't hear from a lot of county election administrators. I think one, I want to say Broadwater County showed up in opposition or in support of eliminating same-day voter registration, but I don't believe any of the major county folks that have the long lines actually showed up to oppose or to support this. So it seems like it's sort of a problem that doesn't necessarily exist. So that's a tough one. That means we're just going to have to double down and make sure that folks are registered to vote prior to election day, and do all we can to kind of triple down on that effort. It'll be really tough, and be interesting to see if in 2022 there's long lines of folks that get in line to find out they're not eligible to vote because they didn't register that day before, and see what sort of backlash comes from that. The other one that really impacts students is Senate Bill 169, and that just makes it so a student ID is no longer a viable source to vote with. So if someone shows up to vote on election day and they have a student ID, they're going to need a separate identifying document like a bank statement or a utility bill, something proving that they are a resident of that location where they live. So that's another tough one. One thing I'll note is that students could still register to vote and vote absentee and just use their SSN and their address. They wouldn't need that documentation to vote, but this is if they're going to vote at a polling place or vote early at a polling place. So just keeping that in mind. Obviously, we always encourage people to register to vote by mail anyway, and push absentee voting as much as possible. So I don't anticipate us having another statewide mail election this coming time, despite the record voter turnout. So I think it's going to be really important that students are just aware that they're going to need that additional ID if they need to go vote in person. So those are really the three major ones that we've been focusing on. There's one additional one.
So can I pause you on what you just said? So because of the pandemic, our election 2020 was entirely remote, and more than likely future elections are it'll either be absentee or in-person voting.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah. I think we're going to just revert back to what we had been doing, where it's, I don't know that counties will have the authority even to do all mail. I think it'll still just be the mail and in person. So I think that's sort of what we're looking at moving forward, is just sort of what the status quo had been prior to 2020.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I jumped in late, so I know I missed something, and that's on me. But you said that there were three things, Hunter. So one is that student ID is not enough, same day registration not allowed, and it was probably the first one that you said.
Yeah. So the first one is HB 506, and that one hasn't yet to be signed by the governor, but it makes it so if right now, if you were 17 years old and you're going to turn 18 by election day, you could still receive a ballot and vote. Now you could register to vote, but you won't receive that ballot until you meet that eligibility requirement. So when you turn 18 or reside for 30 days. So that just makes it kind of tricky for folks that are turning 18 right before the election, like in a couple days before.
Gotcha.
They'll need to know they may need to go in person.
Thank you.
And I'm trying to recall the last one. Yeah, so the last one I'll just hit on. I don't think this will affect most of you folks, but it's something to be aware of, maybe especially for the tribal colleges, is Senate Bill 319 started off kind of administrative, and then at the very end of the session, a bunch of amendments got put in. Some of them targeted specifically at Montberg. Some folks weren't too happy about the fact that we were doing some of our work, but one of the things it does is makes it so groups that file as political committees cannot do voter registration in dorms or dining halls. So just keeping that in mind, if you have outside organizations like Western Native Voice or Western Native Vote or us and Board Montana or Planned Parenthood, any of those sort of groups would not like legally be allowed inside of dining halls, athletic facilities, or dorm halls to do voter registration. So that's a really unique one. It's might be construed as restricting the First Amendment there. So we're looking at that, but that's just something to be aware of. I don't think the penalties are on the university systems, but I think they are on those individual groups. So I think just being aware of that for now.
What was the number of that legislation?
That one is Senate Bill 319.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a big one that we're focused on. It has to do with some of the way that it changes the way we collect our fee on campus as well. They added a bunch of changes at the very last minute without any public input. So we're keeping our eye on that and seeing what options we might have. But they did add that voter registration piece in there as well. So I just probably be aware of that.
So that restricts, what is it, C4s from doing this, or is there?
I think you could restrict C3s as well. It just has to do with if they're registered as a political committee. So it might be pretty targeted towards C4s. But I think we'll have to get the fine details of that. I think essentially if you file a COPP report because you're doing any election activity, you're going to be restricted. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess as well, like alumni associations during years that there's like 6 mil levy work would also probably be prohibited in engaging in any sort of voter registration in those specific locations.
Wow.
It looks like Andrea's sound is out. He has a question in the chat, how are campuses being made aware of these changes? And does Mark have a flyer that outlines the changes?
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know if the county election administrators are making any effort, and I don't think we have a singular like physical thing of that yet. We are working on our scorecard from the session where we highlight all of these bills, but I can see if we can't get just a quick one pager as well that we could send around to the group.
Yeah, and I'm recording this as well, Andrea, and I'm not sure how long, talking today, but I'll send the link out for playback. Currently, none of these have been signed into the transmission deadline, like today or tomorrow, I think. And maybe Hunter, you can speculate about whether there is some weird audio things going on here. About whether, does the governor plan to sign all of these into law? I don't know, maybe you don't have the crystal ball over at Montberg, but is that the expectation?
Yeah, and I'm looking real quick because I think that, yeah, so HB 176 that eliminates same-day voter registration was signed, and I believe 169 was signed as well, and that's the voter ID one. HB 506 is awaiting a signature, and then that additional one, 319, I think is waiting on a signature. There's another thing they added in has to do with judges and recusing themselves from hearing certain cases if they've received donations. So that's one they're not sure if that will go through because of the governor's administration has spent money on some of these judicial candidates. So it would mean if there was a favorable judge, they couldn't hear their case because they donated. So that's another issue and might be the thing, like the poison pill that kills that one. So I think that's sort of the one thing that's waiting. They added a bunch of amendments into that one at the very end that have nothing to do with voting as well. So it's a unique bill for sure.
All right, other questions that folks have for Hunter? Thanks for being here, by the way, and sharing this. All right, well, Yeah, thanks for doing that rundown. I think the only other issue that that this group I think should quick talk about while we're here is kind of what I think the summer is. Many folks don't have campuses are quiet, so perhaps it's a good time to do some thinking about kind of off election cycle democratic engagement and kind of like that bigger picture, how do institutions support student democratic engagement and voting. But we've kind of had this, we polled everybody and got a sense of kind of what the interest is between kind of like a monthly conversation, I think, or a bi-monthly. So I kind of want to open up like, what would you like to see in this space, this community of practice, and how regularly makes sense for scheduling these check-ins? I think it was.
I wonder if it could actually vary according to what is it a presidential election year? We're probably going to want to meet more often in the time leading up to that. I mean, I think there could be some element of that taken into consideration. I mean, on one hand, if it's scheduled and I put it on my calendar, yeah, I can come to a monthly meeting, but for the next 3 months, I'm going to come here and say, yeah, we got nothing going on. And do we all need to hear that from all of us for a couple of months? I mean, there's just elements where it's like, there's just nothing going on. Our campus is going to be quite as a tune. But if it was a presidential election year, there'd be all sorts of groups wanting to, as soon as fall semester starts, access our campus and, getting input from resources like Montberg and my, all of you. It starts to make more sense to meet more often. And now I think at one point I suggested, I wonder if somebody, not me, could develop a calendar that would kind of ebb and flow with election cycles that might start to make sense for this group. It's a wonderful resource, and especially not having Shayla, I need somebody to help guide me. We've got here in Billings, we're partnering with Forward Montana, but again, it's just quiet time right now. But I think some sort of calendar that is predicated on the election cycles and the midterm elections and presidential elections and when these things flow could be valuable in helping us know when and how much.
And I agree with Lisa. That was one of the things that I had suggested too, is some type of calendar. I know that we worked with, Hannah Pate at Forward Montana to come up with our civic engagement plans. And, I feel like it has a general calendar, at the last page is like a calendar. I mean, it kind of gives us an idea what to do when, but I feel like we could add a lot more to that. And so that's what I kind of put on my to-do list maybe for this summer, is to kind of take that and maybe revise that, and also just taking that document, maybe revising it, but also making sure that I have administration support in it. I mean, I can create this. I want to do this during orientation, and I want to do this for, housing or whatever. But unless everybody else is on board, I'm not going to get anywhere. So, but I would like to at least start with that document, or something like it, with that proposed activities calendar at the end, and maybe make it more thorough, because it does change. I mean, I felt like this was kind of created for that presidential election last year, but now what? I don't want to lose the flow. I don't want to lose some of these activities. I mean, voter registration should be happening all the time, right? So, yeah, that would be, I think that, to me, that would be a very beneficial tool to have.
Yeah, and even incorporating things like suggested mailing time spans, like get your ballots mailed by this date. I mean, that's always, it's gonna be 7 to 10 days before an election if you want it to get wherever it needs to go. Like if you're voting back in a college student voting in whatever home district, whatever the recommended amount of time, and, then you gotta trust US mail, but, things like that would be useful in there as well.
What about we do quarterly every 3 months until 2024 or something? I mean, until we determine like, okay, this is or until the midterm
I
year.
was gonna say, next year is gonna be interesting here in Montana with 2 House representatives again.
Yep.
So I think they'll, and then I'm from Wyoming, so I'm watching that stuff with Liz Cheney. But next year will be interesting potentially.
Yeah.
But
So maybe for academic 21, 22, we do quarterly, just so that we kind of keep a little accountability, and we think about, like you're saying, Lisa, in terms of reminders about, mail ballots by, and, those sort of important kind of calendar events, like the voter registration, or the voter pamphlet comes out, or those sorts of things. And then next summer, we get on a more routine schedule, or a more regular every 2 months or every month, going into the fall. Is that?
I would support the quarterly until, maybe next spring. I feel like summer isn't the best time maybe to get on a monthly schedule. I don't know what anybody else's thoughts are, but I think we need to address that like in April if we want to change or whatever day that is, if we want to change it to monthly or quarterly, or how we want to look at that. But
Okay, so maybe I'll set meetings at this time. I think it's the second Thursday at 10.
sure.
Is that good for
Mhm.
August? And then do over the academic year, and then in April, I'll add a note in that April meeting that says discuss the frequency at which, like, we're getting into AY 22, 23.
Mhm.
So that we can make sure that we have a reminder that we want it to go more routinely starting kind of in the spring next year, and kind of think it through, like what we want, when we want to schedule it for, and how often. Super. Olivia, I don't want to put you on the spot. Does this sound good, though? I don't know if
did you say me?
Olivia at
Olivia.
Fort Peck. Sorry, Lisa. She might not have audio working. That's okay. Well, yeah, okay. I will set that up quarterly until April, first one in August. And then in April, we'll have some kind of trigger where we kick off a more doing the meeting more often.
Well, I looked, if we meet in August, it'd be August, November, February, May. So, I mean, those would be every 3 months. So you might want to make that May, I guess.
Until the May meeting, that's
Mhm.
our last one, and then we just need to remember at the May meeting to
Address it.
address it. Yep, that sounds good. Yeah, I'll put an agenda item in the May meeting then. Andrea says, might be good to meet in October versus November since elections are early November. Good point. Yeah, so we'll do August, October, and just get on kind of a 3-month cycle from there. And Hunter, are you or Liz willing to keep coming and kind of sharing your perspective on these things?
Yeah, I think so. You know, we'll have municipal elections and local elections this year, so we'll be doing stuff like that at UM and MSU, but we might have some info in August of like what our plans are and what other campuses might be able to do as well. So that should work for us fine.
Excellent, thank you. All right, well, anything else that we ought to address or question? Last chance to hit Hunter with your deep questions about these House bills, Senate bills, or anything else.
I guess I have one quick question. You know, I know we kind of talked about having a calendar or a timeline. Do you have anything like that, Hunter, that you have for your organization?
You know, we don't have one that we have like extended out. It's usually something that we sort of will sit down and do like summer planning and then sort of plan that all out. But I feel like we'll have a large enough intern class that, you know, we can probably have someone start working on that and just getting a general timeline put together with general recommended activities, and could share that out as we move forward. But it might be a few weeks out. I think our internship will start like first week of June or so.
Okay.
It also occurs to me, Wendy, I can talk to Pete about putting at least some of the big deadlines like voter registration, election dates, mail your ballots by, kind of those things on the civic engagement calendar that we're talking about.
That'd be perfect.
And then we can make sure to share it with the folks on this group that are not involved with the advisory committee.
Hearing it from multiple places is probably always a good idea for all of us. If it works for the college students.
Yeah, right on. Well, I will talk about getting those dates on there for this academic 21-22 that we're putting together for the civic engagement calendar.
Yeah, and super quickly, I saw Andrea's question about, you know, why these passed. So both the kind of major ones, the one that eliminates same-day voter registration, and then the student ID one, were both Secretary of State Chrissy Jacobson's priorities. So they were her legislation that came in. Basically, her argument's just that we need to make more secure elections. So voter ID is more security, and same-day voter registration is potentially problematic. I think for her reasonings there.
Fascinating stuff. Well, okay, I think I got my marching orders, and look for some meeting requests for starting up in August and then October and then quarterly after that. And if we need to do anything between now and August, holler at me and I'm happy to get it on the calendar. Thanks, everybody.
Sounds good. Thank you all.
Thanks, folks.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Thanks, Hunter.